You pray in your room, but something feels off, not wrong, not dramatic, just distant. You try to focus. You try to be still. But your mind drifts. Your spirit feels heavy. Your thoughts feel crowded. And you tell yourself, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's just a phase. Maybe I need to try harder. But what if the issue is not just internal? What if something in your environment is affecting your sensitivity? Because the Bible is clear, God's presence is not something you control, but it is something you honor. And many people want peace without paying attention to what they're surrounding themselves with. Your bedroom is not just a place to sleep. It's where you think, where you rest, where you process, where you pray, and what you allow in that space matters, not symbolically, practically. Because environment shapes awareness, and awareness determines how you respond to God. This is not about superstition. This is about alignment, because there are things you may be keeping in your personal space that are quietly disrupting your clarity, your focus, and your peace. So today, we're not guessing. We're identifying. 1. Objects that represent compromise in your life. This is where many people look away, because it feels small, insignificant. Just an object. Something you bought. Something you were given. Something you've kept for a long time. But here's the question. What does it represent? Because not everything in your room is neutral. Some things carry meaning. History. Decisions. Patterns you've already recognized as wrong. And yet, you keep them. It might be something connected to a past you've tried to leave. Something that reminds you of a habit you're still struggling with. Something tied to a compromise you never fully addressed. And every time you see it, it reinforces that connection. Not loudly, but consistently you tell yourself, it's just there. It doesn't affect me. I'm not thinking about it like that. But presence matters, because what stays around you continues to speak to you. Even if it's silent, and over time, that weakens your separation from it. You don't feel the urgency to remove it. You don't feel the weight of it anymore. It becomes normal, and once something becomes normal, it stops being challenged. This is how compromise stays in place, not through active decision, but through passive allowance. So ask yourself, is there anything in your room that represents something you already know you should have left behind? Because if it represents compromise, it does not belong in a space where you are trying to pursue clarity. So do not ignore it. Do not justify it. Remove it, not later, not gradually, intentionally, because what you keep around you either supports your direction or quietly resists it. 2. Constant digital distraction that fills every moment. This is one of the most overlooked, because it doesn't look spiritual. It looks normal. Your phone, your laptop, your screen, always within reach, always active, what they are ready to fill silence. You wake up, you check it, you sit down, you scroll, you lie in bed, you watch, listen, consume. There is no space, no pause, no stillness, and then you try to pray. But your mind is scattered, your thoughts are racing, your attention is weak, not because you lack desire, but because your environment has trained your mind to expect constant stimulation. This is not just a habit, it's conditioning, because when every moment is filled, you lose the ability to be still. And stillness is where clarity begins. The Bible speaks about being still. Why? Because without stillness, you cannot focus, you cannot reflect, you cannot hear clearly. But when your room is constantly filled with digital noise, your mind never settles. It jumps from one thought to another, from one input to the next, and over time, your sensitivity decreases. You don't notice it at first, but you feel it when you try to slow down, when you try to pray, when you try to think clearly. So be honest. Is your room a place of rest or a place of constant input? Because if every moment is filled, there is no room for clarity. So do not ignore this. Silence is not empty, it is necessary. And if your environment never allows it, you will struggle to access it. 3. Unresolved disorder that reflects internal neglect. This is not about perfection. This is about awareness. Because your environment often reflects your internal state. Clutter, mess, disorganization, things out of place, things left undone, things ignored repeatedly. You walk in your room, and it feels heavy, not physically, mentally, Because disorder creates noise, not audible noise, mental noise. You see things that need attention. You notice what's incomplete. You feel the weight of what's been avoided, and that affects you, even if you think you've gotten used to it, because your mind processes your environment whether you realize it or not. So when your space is consistently disordered, your mind mirrors that. It becomes scattered, unfocused, easily distracted. And then you try to pray, to focus, to be present, but your environment is working against you. This is not about being extreme. It's about recognizing that order supports clarity, and clarity supports connection. So when your space is neglected, it reflects a pattern of delay, a pattern of avoidance, a pattern of not addressing what needs attention. And those patterns don't stay in your environment. They show up in your thinking, in your discipline, in your decisions. So do not ignore your space, because how you manage it reflects how you manage yourself. And if your environment is constantly neglected, it will affect your ability to focus, to think, and to respond clearly. By now, you can feel it. This is not about objects alone. This is about environment, because your room is not neutral. It is shaping your focus. It is influencing your thoughts. It is either supporting clarity or working against it. We've already uncovered 3 things: objects tied to compromise, constant digital distraction, unresolved disorder. Now we go deeper, because the next 3 are more subtle. Not because they are small, but because they are accepted. 4. Music and audio that disrupt peace instead of supporting it. This is not just about what you listen to. It's about what it creates in your space, because sound shapes atmosphere. You already know this. Some music calms you. Some music agitates you. Some music pulls your mind in directions you didn't intend. But here's what many people ignore. What you consistently play in your room becomes the background of your thinking. And if that background is loud, aggressive, emotionally unstable, mentally distracting, it will affect your ability to be still, not occasionally, consistently. You may not notice it while it's playing, but you feel it when it stops. Restlessness, noise in your thoughts, lack of focus, and then you try to pray. But your mind is still carrying the tone of what you were just listening to, because sound doesn't disappear immediately. It lingers. It shapes your internal state. So when your room is constantly filled with audio that disrupts peace, you are creating an environment that resists stillness. And without stillness, clarity becomes difficult. So be honest, what tone defines your room? Is it calm, or is it constantly stimulating? Because not everything that sounds good is beneficial, and not everything that entertains you supports your focus. So do not treat sound casually, because what you allow into your ears will shape how you think, and how you think will determine how you respond. 5. Emotional attachments you keep physically close. This one is deeper, because it's not just physical, it's emotional. There are things in your room that carry meaning. Photos, gifts, letters, objects tied to specific people or seasons. And on the surface, they seem harmless. But what do they trigger? Because every time you see them, they remind you of something. A relationship, a memory, a version of yourself. And not all of those things are aligned with where you are now. Some of them pull you back emotionally, keep you connected to what you've already outgrown, reopen thoughts that should have been settled, and over time, they create internal conflict. Part of you is trying to move forward, but part of you is still anchored to the past, because you kept a physical connection to something you should have released. This is why environment matters, because what surrounds you affects what stays active in your mind. So if something consistently triggers distraction, reopens old emotions, pulls your focus backward, you need to evaluate it, not emotionally, honestly, because not everything meaningful is meant to be kept close. Some things need distance, not because they were wrong, but because they no longer align. So be careful, because emotional attachment can quietly block clarity, not loudly, not obviously, but consistently. 6. Hidden habits you think no one sees. This is where everything becomes real, because this is not about objects anymore. This is about behavior, things you do in your room when no one is watching, habits you've allowed, patterns you've repeated, actions you justified. You tell yourself, it's private, it's not affecting anything. No one knows, but you know, and that matters, because your private environment is where your discipline is revealed, not your public image, not what people see, but what you allow when you're alone. And if your room has become a place where you consistently avoid responsibility, enter unhealthy patterns, repeat things you know are not right, that affects you. Not externally, first internally, because every repeated action forms a pattern, and patterns shape your thinking, your confidence, your clarity, your ability to focus. So when you try to pray, you feel it, distraction, resistance, lack of confidence, not because God moved, but because your environment has become inconsistent with what you're asking for. This is serious, because you cannot build discipline in a space where you consistently break it, and you cannot expect clarity in a place where your actions create conflict. So be honest. Not about what people see, but about what you allow, because your private habits are shaping your public direction, and if they don't align, you will feel it. Now you see it. Not just a list of things, but a pattern. Objects tied to compromise, constant digital noise, unresolved disorder, disruptive sound, emotional attachments, hidden habits. This is not random. This is environmental misalignment. An environment shapes awareness. The question is no longer, does this matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it? This is where most people stop. They agree. They feel convicted. They recognize what applies to them. And then, nothing changes, because awareness feels like action. It gives you the sense that something has shifted, when in reality, everything stays the same. You notice the clutter. You think about the distractions. You feel uncomfortable about certain habits, but you delay. I'll deal with it later. I just need time. It's not that serious. And slowly, the urgency fades, the clarity fades, and your environment remains unchanged. This is how patterns stay in place, not through resistance, but through delay. So hear this clearly. If you do not act on what you now see, it will continue to affect you, not dramatically, but consistently. You cannot expect clarity in a conflicted environment. This is where honesty matters, because many people want peace, focus, clarity, but they are surrounded by distraction, disorder, unresolved patterns, and those two do not align. You cannot fill your space with noise and expect stillness. You cannot surround yourself with reminders of the past and expect to move forward clearly. You cannot maintain habits that create internal conflict and expect to feel stable. It doesn't work that way, because your environment is constantly reinforcing something, and if what it reinforces does not match what you're seeking, you will feel the tension. Every time you try to focus, every time you try to be still, every time you try to connect, not because something is wrong externally, but because something is misaligned internally. Stop ignoring what needs to be removed. This is the turning point. Not more thinking, not more analyzing. Action, because clarity often begins with removal, not addition. You don't need to add more effort into a space that is already working against you. You need to remove what doesn't belong. That means taking out objects tied to compromise, creating boundaries with digital use, restoring order in your space, changing what fills your environment, letting go of what keeps pulling you back, confronting habits you've been avoiding. Not gradually, not vaguely, specifically, because vague intentions do not create change, clear decisions do. This is not about perfection. It's about alignment. Some people hear this and feel pressure. I need everything to be perfect. I need to fix everything immediately. No, that's not the point. This is not about perfection. This is about alignment. It's about removing what you already know is working against you. Not everything, just what is clear. Because once you begin to align your environment, everything else becomes easier. Your focus improves, your thoughts settle, your discipline strengthens. Not because you forced it, but because your environment stopped working against you. You are responsible for what you allow. No one else controls your space. No one else decides what stays. You do. Every object, every habit, every pattern, you allow it. And if you allow it, it will influence you. Not occasionally, daily, quietly. So stop treating your environment like it doesn't matter, because it does. It shapes your thinking, your discipline, your clarity, and ultimately, your direction. Final warning, if you ignore this, nothing dramatic will happen overnight. That's what makes it dangerous. It will feel normal, familiar, manageable, until one day, you realize you struggle to focus. You feel constantly distracted. You lack clarity in moments that matter, and you won't immediately trace it back to your environment. But it started there, with what you allowed, What you ignored, what you chose not to address, that's how influence works. Not loudly, but consistently. Final instruction, so don't complicate this. If something in your room represents compromise, fills your mind with constant noise, creates disorder, disrupts your peace, pulls you into the past, reinforces unhealthy patterns, do not keep it. Not because it's extreme, but because it's necessary. Because your environment should support your direction, not resist it. You don't need a different space, you need a cleared space, and that begins with what you choose to remove. Today,